Good morning, good afternoon to everyone in this virtual space. We are happy today to see so many participants coming from European countries, but also from an impressive number from outside Europe. So we have in the participant list registered for this event experts from Peru, Mexico, Kenya, Egypt, Tanzania, Georgia, Colombia, and much more. So this means in a very clear way that understanding the change in education and funding together solutions is not only something that bother European cultural heritage sector, but from outside Europe, people are facing the same challenges and are looking to us, and in particular to the project that is developed by Charter Alliance as the place to find ideas, opportunities to learn, and possible solutions in other contexts. So I think that this is for me an important takeaway when I analyze these facts and figures. And this is something I believe that the project should take in consideration, so that this space of today, but also the funding that will be released at the end of this year will be also assessed, analyzed, and used from other countries outside the European space. Today we are also at the end of a three-talk series, a series that we have designed in partnership with ENCATC, the European Network of Cultural Management and Policy. We have designed in partnership with the Charter European Alliance, a very important project that brings together the full range of the cultural heritage sector in Europe. For those who are joining us for the first time, Juan will link in the chat the website where you can find an impressive numbers of documents that were developed so far by the alliances. We have to organize together with our partners a first talk in April where we have together assessed how to preserve, innovate, capitalize on cultural heritage through education, training, and regional cooperation. The second talk has a focus on sharing insight into process of mapping and analyze dynamics of cultural heritage professional and other stakeholders engagement, synergies and skills in terms of need shortage in the cultural heritage sector. For the one that have participated to this talk, the conversation was very animated, very rich, and the presentation extremely insightful. The talks, the recording is also available on the website, so if you are interested, don't hesitate to watch these extremely interesting discussions. And voila, that we are now in June at the end of this fantastic and successful cooperation for another talk that will be devoted to explore how education and training, they will be incorporated in guidelines for innovative emerging education and training pathways. In the next 1 hour and a half, you will have the opportunity to listen from a very strong expert, but also very committed and engaged project partners on how to faster understand the distinctive feature of cultural heritage and training education, but also what makes heritage education and training innovative, emerging, which segment of heritage education and training should be further developed. So this discussion will help the participants to gain practical insight and information on cultural heritage, craft and knowledge, community engagement, international cultural heritage relations, cultural heritage in digital environment, and much more. I'm not going to continue this presentation because I'm sure that after this short introduction, you are always very, very much interested in learning much more. And for these objectives, I move from Brussels to Vienna, where we have Karin Riegler that is ready to start presenting you the introduction of this talk. Karin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Janalia, for your kind welcome. And thank you also to you personally and your colleagues at ENCATC for your incredible support in hosting these webinars. Charter is really greatly indebted to you. Well, hello and welcome. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I would like to begin with a short recap of the program. My introduction will be followed by a panel in which we will dive deeply into 4 innovative emerging education and training paths. This section will be followed by an open debate, which will be the part of the webinar where we want to hear from you, our audience. So please take notes and ask us any questions you may have. We are also very grateful for any feedback or comments. And finally, we will conclude this webinar with a short recap and next steps. What is Charter? Charter is the European Cultural Heritage Skills Alliance. It is an EU blueprint project that has been running now for 3.5 years and will conclude at the end of this year. All blueprint projects funded by the EU, you can see we are funded by the Erasmus Plus program, are about 3 main aspects. The first aspect is about identifying skills gaps and needs. What are the mismatches between the education and training sector and the employment sector? The second step in every blueprint project is the design of education and training opportunities that are meant to bridge that gap. And it's highlighted here because it's this aspect that we will discuss today in this webinar. And thirdly, this is of course the final step in each blueprint project. It's about a long-term strategy for a given sector that outlines a roadmap for future development and also highlights the contributions of this sector, in this case, the cultural heritage sector, for Europe's economy, society, and environmental sustainability. This map shows you the 47 Charter members of our consortium and where they are situated in Europe. Now I come to the actual topic of this talk. It's based on a report that is called the Guidelines on Innovative and Emerging Cultural Heritage Education and Training Paths. You'll find it at the link that Juan just posted before among the Charter results. I begin with the objectives for this report. We wanted to create a flexible framework of education and training opportunities that could be adapted to different regional and national education systems. For those of you who live and work in the EU, you know that education and training systems can differ greatly from country to country, even within the European Union. Sometimes in larger countries, there are even great regional differences. And we wanted to take account of that. And as Janalia said before, we hope that our framework is flexible enough that it can also be put to good use to colleagues, to education and training providers outside the European Union. And of course, we also wanted the system to be able to take care of different national, regional, or even local skills needs and gaps. Our framework had to encompass all education and training sectors. You see the acronyms here. Of course, in cultural heritage, we are talking about vocational education and training, also higher education and training, and continuing education and training, what is sometimes also referred to as lifelong learning, as well as different qualification levels. And we hope to provide a framework that is useful to a wide variety of stakeholders. Of course, our main addressees with this work are education and training providers, but we hope it's also useful for cultural heritage professionals thinking of up or reskilling, students who may be planning or considering a career in cultural heritage, as well as policymakers and researchers. Our sources for this deliverable was work that we undertook previously within the Charter network. We developed a model for the cultural heritage ecosystem, which is, of course, a very important source for our education and training framework. Also, the work on core cultural heritage skills, which Charter thinks ought to be part of every cultural heritage curriculum. We did an extensive analysis of existing heritage curricula and worked on identifying indicators on what makes curricula innovative and emerging in the heritage framework. We also did actually several gaps and needs analysis, and we looked also, of course, at external drivers of change. And then what we did, and what is always useful, we listened to different stakeholders inside and outside our alliance at conferences that Charter organized at, or other meetings that Charter representatives were invited to. What were our main learnings from all this research? I'll start with the right-hand column, the content, the priority content areas. People-centered approaches to heritage kept coming up in different contexts. The engagement of diverse communities. Hardly anybody can think about education and training these days if we are not addressing sustainability issues and counteracting the climate crisis. Crafts are very important aspects in cultural heritage education, but so is urban regeneration. Digitalization, a very big topic, as you will hear in a minute, and new technologies. Health and well-being in the cultural heritage context, social justice and democracy, as well as various international aspects. In order to implement all these learnings into the cultural heritage sector, it's clear also we need people with legal training who know about policy development and design, who know how to actually draft laws or regulations to implement these goals. And of course, change needs appropriate leadership and management skills and methods. Now, what to look out for in terms of structural curricula design? As you could see, though, all these content areas are actually situated at the intersection of heritage with other disciplines. Therefore, inter and transdisciplinary approaches to heritage education and training turned out to be pretty much at the forefront. We talk about, in our recommendations, we talk about cross-pollination of heritage knowledge to other fields. Charter would also encourage education and training providers offering cultural heritage education to be very clear about what are core cultural heritage skills and transversal skills in a specific educational programs. In many programs, it probably makes a lot of sense to include work-based learning opportunities, as well as make values and ethics an explicit, not just an implicit part of the curriculum. And finally, two structural elements that apply to all education and training, but we feel it doesn't hurt to mention them here again as well. Clarity about learning outcomes, that is, which skills and knowledge ought to be transmitted in a specific program, and qualifications levels, as well as quality assurance and transparency. For instance, on student workload, using credit systems for that, which is, of course, or which in the European context are ECTS and ECVET for the vocational sector. Now, based on these learnings, what we did is we translated them in 8 education and training paths or pathways. And these are broader than just individual curricula. They can encompass several curricula in a given content area, but they can be from VET, higher education, or continuing education and training, and they can be situated on different levels, on different qualifications levels. You see the 8 pathways that we defined here. I don't need to read them to you. In the next session, we will look in detail at 4 of these pathways, which we think provide an excellent cross-section of our learnings in this deliverable. Thank you very much. That's it from me for the introduction. Sorry, Jana-Lia, you're muted.
Thank you, Karin. So thank you, Karin, for this insightful introduction that has clearly set the context for the panel that is now following, a panel that will be discussed about innovative and emerging cultural heritage education and training path. It will be moderated by Wolfgang Batz, Professor Emeritus at the Academy of Fine Arts of Vienna. So, Wolfgang, the floor is yours to introduce the speakers of the panel and moderate the discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Jana-Lia, for this introduction. Welcome from my side to the audience. Meanwhile, I see 43 participants. And yes, this will be the panel now, the panel on innovative and emerging cultural heritage, education and training paths or pathways. And the idea of this panel is to introduce our work on these educational pathways to present the basic content with the aim of stimulating an open discussion, which we are going to have afterwards. And therefore, I would like to ask you, the audience, to listen closely, to listen intently, and to maybe take notes on questions which you might have. I will introduce now the 4 panelists. That is Marleen Hofland-Mohl from the Erasmus University Rotterdam, Margherita Sani from the NEMO Network of European Museum Organizations, and Herman Bashiro Mendolicchio from the University of Barcelona, and last but not least, Marzia Piccinino from the Fondazione Scuola dei Beni e delle Attività Culturali. Marlene will start the panel and she will talk about the pathway, cultural heritage, crafts and knowledge. Please, Marlene.
Thank you, Wolfgang, and thank you that on behalf of Erasmus University, who's a full partner of Charter, I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to present one of the 4 pathways Charter has chosen to highlight during this ceremony, which is cultural heritage, crafts and knowledge. As a goldsmith, this pathway is dear to my heart, and I'd like to start by introducing the craft, since it is important to frame it. Crafts and crafts knowledge, we see it as expressions of both tangible and intangible heritage. Practitioners of traditional crafts and their knowledge on techniques and materials are essential for the conservation and restoration of tangible heritage. Moreover, as living cultural heritage, craft practices have been recognized as intangible cultural heritage too. Despite international recognition, cultural heritage craft face challenges, risking decline. Maintaining education and training is crucial, as crafts offer essential knowledge in terms of re-innovation, sustainable low-carbon resource management and production, creating local employment, strengthening circular economy, and fostering a repair culture. The last 3.5 years, Charter has done extensive research on the challenges cultural heritage, craft and knowledge faces. During this seminar, I would like to address the 10 most significant. First, traditional crafts are endangered or have already become extinct in some cases because they have been replaced by global, generic and more industrialized high-volume production models. Next to that, we saw that in the heritage sector, that there is an existential vulnerability of certain irreplaceable skills as it's seen in crafts or other family-driven and community-led professional practices. In heritage are often leading to an age cliff, which brings me to the 3rd point, the lack of new entrants, and in particular to the impossibility of transferring this traditional knowledge and skills. The 5th challenge I would like to address is the shortage of skilled craft workers in the sector. At the same time, similar skills are still learned in countries with strong crafts and family-driven businesses, some of whom come to Europe through migration and other channels, but fail to find meaningful employment or an opportunity to continue their crafts, losing part of their heritage at the same time. This lack of visibility transnationally on job and mobility opportunities is not resolved by the ERS, European Employment Services, nor by other national sectoral job portals. As such, international opportunities and professional mobility is not guaranteed. And related to this is the 7th point that I would like to address, which is internship and traineeships, which are critical to professional development and early career professions, offer have little or no remuneration, especially not in the crafts. Another effect of this challenge is the effectively debar of entrants from low income or social backgrounds that are not already engaged with the heritage sector. We also noted, and that brings me to the aim point, that the European Quality Assurance Standard for VAT, the EQ-VAT, hasn't been widely implemented and lack many essential elements of their HI equivalent. Furthermore, ECVAT, the European Credit System for Vocational Education and Training, an important transparency tool to measure student workload, has not been implemented in all countries for workload learning either. The 9th point I'd like to address is the recognition of prior learning as an essential precondition for ensuring the professional and educational advancement, employment, mobility, and earning prospects of European cultural heritage professionals. Moreover, recognition presents particular challenges for the heritage sector, while the irreplaceable nature of cultural heritage requires that only qualified persons work in the sector. A number of structural aspects of heritage education and training make recognition of qualifications especially difficult. This aspect includes a great deal of learning taking place in non-formal and informal setting, in particularly the crafts. Lastly, research and development are axiomatic to the development of professional practices. In the field of heritage practice, R&D are carried out in different modalities and contexts that do not always follow conventional academic research methods. New research-based approaches to technical and theoretical knowledge generation are required to address the fast-moving operation environment and increasingly complex and multifaceted dimensions of heritage that are not amenable to experience nor established procedures alone. Having touched upon the most significant challenges regarding cultural heritage, crafts and knowledge, I would also like to present some of the solutions that Charter proposes. For example, for the enhancement and survival of craft, the implementation of a suitable regulatory framework, funding lines, as well as mentoring and training opportunities for professionals are needed to offset negative impact of high levels of atypical work patterns, employment precarity, and low exchange of expertise. Next, improve the interoperability of ERS with national, regional, and sectoral job portals and enhance the use of Europass to effectively guarantee heritage professionals regarding work opportunities and mobility at interregional, national, European, and international level. Establish, the third point, systems of validation and certification on both national and regional levels that are transferable and recognizable across Europe. And in line with this, ensure that the validation and certification of non-formal and informal learning applies to all education and training sectors and EQF, so the European Qualification Framework levels, including access to what we call the EQF level 8, the doctoral level. Fourth, facilitate knowledge transfer pathways at national, regional, and European level to pursue new avenues of research identified by practitioners and educators that are required to address sectoral knowledge. Promote the appreciation of heritage by introducing heritage literacy to reinforce the principles of communal ownership for cultural heritage among the general population, starting with school children. Next to that, crafts and traditional knowledge in education in primary and secondary schools has high potential for keeping crafts knowledge alive and thriving. Which brings me to the second point related to what we call the Copenhagen process and its framework that should be strengthened further, developing the EQF based on the principle established by their HI equivalent to create a robust European system of quality assurance for VAT, vocational education and training. Seventh, crafts and crafts training have huge potential for the integration of migrants in the EU workforce and society at large. Moreover, many of these migrants very often come from countries where traditional crafts, in contrast to Europe, are still practiced in everyday life. From a different perspective, traditional crafts have the ability to counteract the competition coming from mass production and branding. To enhance this development, the implementation of the European regulation on the use of IP to protect craftsmanship, knowledge and products, as well as lifelong learning courses to introduce and update entrepreneurial knowledge among craftspeople is needed. Next to that, the 9.9 point we saw as a solution is facilitate knowledge transfer pathways at national, regional, and European level, pursue new avenues of research identified by practitioners and educators that are required to address sectoral knowledge deficiencies, obstacles, and opportunities. Which brings me to the last solution so far. Implement education and training curricula modeled on the guidelines for cultural heritage crafts and knowledge pathways that include, as proposed by Charter, which include traditional, contemporary, and innovative material techniques, tools, machinery, design, and production. Before giving the floor to my Charter colleague, Margherita Sani, I would like to conclude briefly with some of the challenges that Charter foresees regarding the implementation of the proposed solutions. For example, the limited capacity of small businesses to support apprenticeships and smart upscaling. Next to that, there is a societal bias towards higher education qualifications. We foresee a problem regarding reluctance of education and training providers to commit to research intensive craft training. And lastly, unrecognized skills that impact professional standing and the mobility. I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your questions and like to invite Margherita to present the next charter pathway of this seminar.
Thank you, Marlene, and thank you, everyone, all those of you who are with us this afternoon. And of course, thank you to my colleagues who organized this webinar. I'm not going to read this text, which briefly explains what community engagement is about, because you will find it in the literature, in the charter literature. At the end of this session, you will also receive links to our documents. And so you will be able to read it in your own time, at your own pace, and so on, this and more. So we go straight into another of the 8 paths or pathways. And I will start with the question, why community engagement? And also why we called it community engagement. We could have called it public engagement. We could have called it audience engagement. And I'll also come to a second to the why I chose this quite odd picture to illustrate this content area. We identified community engagement as one of the richest content areas for new competencies, new skills, and also new professions. This is also because, exactly as Karin was saying in her introduction, there is this people-centered approach. And I thought I would quote one of the charter products, one of the reports of Charter, which says that new heritage, it's also called new heritage. So it's seen as a values-based and people-centered heritage. So where there is this interaction between producers, between people who promote, protect heritage, there is this blending of, say, curators and users, because in the end, it is our common heritage. It's everybody's heritage, and we should all take care of it, promote it, protect it, and valorize it, and so on. And this, of course, has very, very important implications when it comes to jobs and skills for the sector. I thought I would just mention some of the key concepts behind this idea. So the fact that indeed we're all stewards of heritage. This is a collective stewardship. Of course, I refer, and we all refer, to the Faro Convention as one of the most important documents in this respect, which gave a formulation definition of a heritage community as a community of people who collectively take care of heritage, identify themselves with that heritage. Of course, the concept of participation. If we open up to the society, to communities, participation is a precondition. Collective and co-curation and crowdsourcing points to, again, the production of content related to heritage, not only from the point of view or by the experts, but by everybody. And of course, this means that working in partnerships with other sectors, with sectors of society, but also with other professional sectors, and in a multidisciplinary perspective, is crucial. I also thought I would mention this pro-am, what is identified as the pro-am revolution, which means that professionals in the cultural heritage sector and lay people and amateurs are on the same continuum. So there is this, again, this giving and taking, and this joint collaboration and this collective effort. And of course, all of this can be achieved if cultural organizations, cultural heritage organizations, open up to participatory governance, so to including other voices, other perspectives, other players into the governing of the of cultural heritage. Now I'll explain you what the picture is about. That was the most important part. So can we go back to the previous slide? What we did, having these 8 areas, 8 innovative and emerging cultural heritage education and training pathways. What we did during one of the charter dissemination events, the first one actually, which took place at the beginning of May in Aschaffenburg during the annual conference of the German Museums Association, we thought we would ask participants to validate these findings. And so we put up a poster with the 8 areas. As you can see, there's 9 because the empty one, the last one, does not refer to one of the 8 areas, but to other. So people could actually put post-its on it. And we asked them to put a pin on the one that they thought is more relevant for their professional development. And as you can see, the first one, which is community engagement, is the one that got the most pins. Along with the second best was the participatory leadership and management, because indeed, community engagement and participatory management are 2 sides of the same coin. So now let's go deeper into what this means in terms of emerging areas. As I said, this sub area, community engagement, has many sub areas. It is one of the richest of the pathways that we studied. What does it include? It includes accessibility. Of course, if we want to achieve, to have new heritage that's open to everyone, for everyone to contribute, for everyone to feel involved and represented, we need to be accessible. We need to be inclusive and diverse. We need to, of course, develop our audience. And again, as by the EU definition, this means not only widening your audience, but also diversifying it and making it more loyal. And then interpretation is a very, very crucial aspect of all this, because interpretation means adding layers of meaning to heritage. And normally, I mean, traditionally, this has been done by curators, professionals, but now the sector needs to open up to new narratives, make space for multiple voices and perspectives, which also connects to decolonization, which is also a different way of interpreting heritage, revealing stories that for the most part have remained hidden. Co-curation, co-creation, intercultural dialogue. Health and well-being was also mentioned. This is also, we included it in, and it's really an emerging area, as I see, especially in the museum sector. It's coming up very, very strong. And cultural welfare, which includes health and well-being, both for people and also for the staff. So if we look at the skills that are required to actually, tackle these, yes, it's fine. If we look at the skills, definitely facilitation, mediation, brokerage, these are skills that will be requested, are requested already of professionals, because with this interaction with the public, inevitably, you have to negotiate, to facilitate, to create the conditions for sharing knowledge, ideas, content, and so on. Project management is crucial. Participatory leadership and management was already mentioned. Working in partnership, both with audiences, stakeholders, other players, other sector, and working in a transdisciplinary way and in transdisciplinary teams. Interpretation, so developing interpretive narratives that integrate other aspects, also controversial aspects, different points of view. This is another skill that professionals need to acquire. And of course, and I only mentioned a few of the so crucial, so important transversal or soft skills: empathy, communication, problem solving, negotiation. And finally, I would like to mention some of the professions that we came across. And first of all, audience developer. I mean, on audience development, at least three European funded projects were dedicated. They are destined project if you need more to go more into this. But there are also, and the audience developer is also a profile that Charter worked on, and you will find it described on the Charter website. We also see popping up accessibility managers, diversity manager in cultural heritage institutions, heritage interpreter. I mean, Interpret Europe has a wide range of skills that are listed for interpreters, cultural mediators, public engagement coordinators, outreach officers, and so on. I'll let you read it. But and then I come to the last two, which are maybe the most peculiar for me when I identified them. Curator of Indigenous Perspectives. This is a job that was created at the Manchester Museum, and which clearly links to the decolonization aspect. And then Program Manager of Mental Health at the Museum of the Mind in Haarlem, in the Netherlands. For the first time in a museum, there is someone in charge of managing mental health. So all of this really draws a picture of great movement, of great innovation, and then we will have the time to reflect together on how we can support all this. Thank you. And now I give the floor to Herman Bashiron Mendolicchio to talk about international cultural heritage relations.
Thank you very much, Margherita, and hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure sharing this panel and this webinar with so many colleagues from the Charter project and with so many participants interested in the project. And thanks as well to ENCAT that is providing this platform to discuss the Charter work on innovative emerging curricula. So, another pathway, another area or field that Charter identified as an emerging one, or also as an urgent one, we can say, is focused on international cultural heritage relations. That is a combination between knowledge in cultural heritage and knowledge in international relations, specifically in the cultural field. Why we consider it as an important pathway or area? We all know that we live in a fast-changing world, in a fast-changing society where we are all connected to each other, and where it's possible that something happening in the other side of the world can have an impact in our own local context. We are aware that we are not only facing local challenges, but global challenges that can have and do have an impact on heritage, such as the threats caused by climate change or natural disasters, as well as political crises and conflicts that do harm as well heritage. But beyond the challenges, it's also important to highlight that heritage plays a fundamental role in fostering international exchange and cooperation, and in today's world is key to learn about the strategies and opportunities of working internationally, and also to understand how to create the conditions to work internationally. Next slide, please. So in this fast-changing and interconnected context, cultural heritage professionals are requested to be aware of the international challenges, to be aware and to get to know the international frameworks and the opportunities that exist for many reasons. On the one side, because we operate more and more through international funded projects, such as Charter. This is a key example, a clear example. And working in international projects require specific knowledge and a set of skills and competencies to work in this changing intercultural environment, where you have a set of very diverse stakeholders with different values and different needs and expectations that you need to deal with. On the other side, as previously mentioned, we are called to face and deal with challenges at global scale that relate to climate change and natural disasters, to the so-called 3 Cs, the conflict, crime, and colonialism, to issues related to illicit trafficking or the restitution of cultural property, that is also a very big topic nowadays. And all of these challenges require cooperation with different entities and to know how to deal with sensitive topics. So there are specific skills as well to deal with sensitive topics and to deal with this very different set of challenges and very different set of stakeholders, as said. And Charter identified then the need to develop knowledge in these areas that will require a cross-sectoral and inter-transdisciplinary approach that will require knowledge in cultural diplomacy, in cultural cooperation, and international relations, not only within EU, intra-European, but also extra-EU, as also Giannalia said at the very beginning. It's very important to go also beyond Europe in that sense. We identified that it's to work in this field or to train in this field, it's important to have competencies to deal with international stakeholder and audiences, understanding diversity, and having intercultural communication. So we can look more specifically at the general learning outcomes as we have in this scheme that Charter has identified for this field. I won't be reading this in detail because we have a lot of information, and because also this will be shared with you all, and you will be finding the deliverable and the related materials in our web that, if I'm not wrong, was shared at the beginning in the chat, and I can suggest also ENCATC to share it again for the participants that connected later. But it's important to say that this scheme is providing the general learning outcomes in terms of knowledge, in terms of core skills, and in terms of transversal skills that we consider in Charter that can be helpful to design innovative and emerging curricula in all education and training programs, in higher education, in vocational education and training, in lifelong learning, in continuous development programs, and so on. And these are the key structural elements that take into account the challenges and opportunities of the field of international cultural heritage relations. I think it's important as well, in the deliverable, you also have all these possible professions that Margherita was suggesting for the previous pathway. You have it in all the different pathways. And in the deliverable, we also suggested 2 possible new curricula in this field, in this specific field of international cultural heritage relations, that are one is a program in countering cultural heritage crimes and illicit trafficking. We consider that this specific aspect was very important to be developed, the focus on illicit trafficking. And then we also suggested another curriculum, international strategies in management of cultural heritage sites and projects. This designed for cultural heritage professionals and independent cultural managers who wish to explore the opportunities and complexities of working internationally. As to conclude, I would connect to what Giannalia said in her introduction, that we have many common challenges, not only in Europe, but all over the world. And in order to find solutions, we need to share different approaches and share different perspectives, especially in this, I would say, extremely interesting and challenging moment in which we are transitioning to a more multipolar world with different and diverse actors playing their role in the international arena. The big challenge, I would say, from our side is finding the best strategies to have the field of education and training in cultural heritage adapting fast to the changes happening in today's world. Because we have different kind of, it goes not at the same rapidity, the education and the world. So thank you, and I give the floor to my next colleague, Marzia Piccinino from the Fondazione Scuola dei Beni e delle Attività Culturali.
Thank you, Herman, and thank you also to Marlene and Margherita for their previous presentation of the pathways. I'm going to conclude talking about cultural heritage in digital environment, That is an area quite pretty well known and investigated. And in fact, when approaching the description of this pathway, we could rely on several documents ranging from the reports issued immediately before or during the pandemic, like the NEMO reports or the MC report of 2019, but also to policy acts of the European Commission, in addition also to the wide range of courses on digital humanities and cultural heritage released across Europe. We then match this information with the outcomes of the charter analysis, and this is what emerged. Next slide, please. At first, even though there are a number of European frameworks describing either core or transversal skills, both at the organizational point of view and individual point of view, a specific, comprehensive framework for digital skills in the context of heritage professions doesn't exist. This has a serious impact on the skills intelligent efforts and for the education and training design and delivery. Secondly, despite of the average high level of education that cultural professionals have, despite the pandemic experience, despite digital transformation is perceived as crucial for the sector, there is still a significant shortage of digital skills and competencies. This applied for both transversal and core digital skills. And in fact, even we may say that the private use of digital media and meals are a background for the development of digital skills and competencies. Our analysis showed that there is still a necessity of training in the cultural heritage sector. And finally, the surprising attitude of the youngest professionals who don't seem to consider a problem the lack of digital skills, or better, they don't feel the problem. This topic would deserve, of course, to be deepened because the reasons behind may be several. However, we believe that this must be taken into consideration when designing new curriculum. It's a way to design new ones. Next slide, please. What's then the way to acquire new digital skills? In general, the core academic education is perceived as satisfactory. And the fact that it doesn't necessarily rely on the use of digital tools is not considered a problem or an obstacle, because for the charter stakeholders, the best environment to learn is the professional practice. And this is perfectly in line with what emerged before in the OMC report. In fact, quoting one of the heritage stakeholders we interviewed, we may say that it's not important to teach specific tools, but rather the approach to adapt the skills needed when they are needed. This means that lifelong learning and continuing education, professional development, in particular on the job, this is a crucial point, are seen as the best training, upskilling and reskilling opportunities in this area. And there, which are the most pressing needs when talking about digital skills for the heritage professionals? As you can see in the deliverable in 3.6, we highlighted three main areas of intervention, of observation that for us are very crucial. At first, we have the strategic thinking. It's still common, in fact, that professionals or organizations can't embrace the digital transformation because they lack of vision, and therefore are not able to design a holistic, comprehensive, transversal strategies for digital cultural heritage. Education and training providers there are encouraged to co-design with heritage institutions. This is very important. Some programs that can support a conscious uptaking of the digital transformation. Therefore, co-design with cultural heritage institutions for strategic thinking. The second important point is the cooperation between heritage professionals and ICT providers. In particular, the ones coming from research institute or private companies dealing with advanced cutting-edge technologies. In fact, the pathway we proposed aims at fostering the reciprocal understanding of skills and needs when approaching a digital project in cultural heritage. In fact, even if academic programs in digital humanities are very common and consolidated, the dialogue with the digital technology developers and providers is still sometimes very, very hard. A cross-fertilization approach among professionals with technological or heritage background for the development of digital cultural heritage programs and projects is then a pressing issue and an area where new curriculum, joint curriculum may be there. The last important point, but it's one of the most important that reconnects also to what Herman has said right now, is how to face the challenges of how to face the technological challenges, in particular artificial intelligence. In fact, understanding the potentialities and using the artificial intelligence is one of the most emerging needs. In particular, we tracked the necessity of designing education and training paths for preparing future digital transformation leaders, not technicians, leaders that are able to uptake artificial intelligence and govern, this is most important, artificial intelligence-based services in a confident, critical, and above all, ethical way. One of the points that emerge in our analysis, in fact, is the ethical use of digital technologies that have several implications, in particular for the overproduction of data and as a consequence of pollution. Here I close the presentations of the pathway, and I leave the floor to my next colleague, to Connor, for the open debate. I do hope that you had some thoughts to share with us. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to thank the 4 panelists. I think this is a very rich background for the open discussion which is going to follow and which is being conducted by Connor. Yes, please, Connor.
Okay, hi everybody, and thank you to all of our speakers so far. And thank you in particular to the audience here. I think there's plenty of food for thought in what we have heard so far, which, as mentioned at the start, is just a sample. In many ways, as an educator, and standing aside a little bit from the Charter project, I think the Charter is giving voice and weight to innovative curricula that you and your colleagues have already created, that you may be testing right now, or that you may be dreaming of. And I think ultimately Charter is hoping that you will use these 8 pathways in different configurations, whichever suits you and your audiences best, as policy and resource mandates. So in other words, use these as a battering ram in your home institutions, in your regions, and in the political landscapes that you work in, to generate policy and resource to support these initiatives. As well as endorsing the approaches, we hope that our perspective on these different pathways opens up new dimensions for you. So remember also, before we open up the floor to the discussants, that there is also running through all of what you've heard so far and the other 4 remaining pathways, the evidence coming from the research by Charter of the importance of professional development, continuing professional development, upskilling, and lifelong learning. So this is not just creating pathways for undergraduates or postgraduates, but also to take into account the fact that there are professionals who now need to upskill in order to work in this new environment. So what I would like to do now is to invite comments and questions from the floor. Rather than putting your questions into the chat, because there's a lot of participants, there's nearly 50 of you there, which will make it quite difficult for me to be kind of moving backwards and forwards between questions in the chat and people who have their hands up. What I would like to do is invite you to put your hands up. Now, once you put your hands up, your hands will appear, you will appear in sequence. So don't worry, I won't lose sight of you, notwithstanding the fact that all of these little photographs and postage stamps with your names on them are spread over 2 pages. So I suppose to prime the pump, as it were, in terms of a discussion, as educators, of course, these curricula, create both opportunities and challenges for you. they present a scenario of intertrans and cross-disciplinarity that generates, again, its own challenges. And also this question, because one of the things that needs to be emphasized and is emphasized in all of the Charter reports on education and training, is that while these new pathways are being advocated for by Charter, that they do not replace or substitute traditional training in technical areas that are absolutely the bedrock of caring for our heritage as well. So don't lose sight of those as you head in. So again, just to come back to this, the challenges and opportunities that these 4 curricula present to you, and with that thought in mind, I'll now open this up to discussion. So if you have anything you'd like to say or comment or ask a question, just please raise your hand and we'll go to you. John Carmen, we have a question from you. You need to turn on your mic, John, and off you go.
Thank you. It just a thought that crossed my mind was wondering on a sort of broader strategic level, because I had absolutely no problem with what was being presented today. I thought they were really, really insightful and useful. So thank you very much. Is from a sort of broadly strategic level, I can see 2 ways of achieving what we're trying to achieve here. One is by including in established pathways such as they are, or developing new ones that bring all these new skills and requirements into them, or whether we insinuate ourselves, the heritage sector, into those curricula and programs that already exist out there, in order that then we sort of pull the people who are already engaged in studying digital technology and its application, for example, or various aspects of international relations and so on. We pull them then into our sector in order that we have those skills. Because it seems to me there's 2 different approaches that we can take. I suppose we could do both of them simultaneously, but I wonder if which would be the preferred one. Do we insinuate ourselves into what's already going on, or do we develop our own programs in these areas specifically designed for ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that observation. It's very clever. I think that Marzia maybe has her hand up to answer that question. So I'll let Marzia be the one to handle it. But my immediate reaction is, John, a bit of both is probably what is needed. But Marzia, do you want to respond to John?
Yes, you're right. Of course, Connor. When describing these pathways in our deliverable, we also took into account a third approach to create to suggest pathway from scratch, because there are of course existing innovative curricula already existing. We analyze also in another report of the project, and there is also a mixed approach when we took existing pathway and merged with what we think is needed to complement that pathway, and we also try to imagine new ones from the scratch. There is no specific receipts. All of them are good.
Mm-hmm. So just to come back to that question, John, because obviously you have a little bit of experience in this. What are the pros and cons between the 2?
Well, given that there is, I mean, it seems to me that at least in the initial stages, it might be best for us to insinuate ourselves into what's already going on elsewhere. Because if the skills we are trying to develop already don't exist in our field, it's going to be very difficult for people working in the field to train and educate people into those skills. So what we need to do maybe is to insinuate as our own area into what's going on elsewhere, and then, as it were, sort of pull people across from them. I appreciate later on, yeah, it may well be in a position where we can happily put these skills into our own educational efforts, but you know, yes, it will be different in different places, and I fully appreciate that. But yeah, I asked the question because I don't really know the answer.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine everyone's operating in a slightly different environment, but it all boils down to institutional politics. In my own institution, there was a call went out for people who'd like to contribute to a module that was going to be offered to all students on sustainability studies. And I think archaeology was the last door they knocked on, but only because they felt they had to. And suddenly we propelled ourselves right into the center of that offering. So there are different ways of skinning that cat. Does anybody else have a question or observation? Or perhaps I could ask if anyone has attempted to already create these inter-trans and cross-disciplinary programs. What pieces of advice would you give? What moments of inspiration or little bits of genius that you yourselves have found that you might like to share with us? I think, Anna, you have your hand up. And Anna Piri?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I did it like manually because I couldn't find in this Zoom version how to digitally raise my hand. So I think I already wanted to intervene before, but even more after your comments right now, like to give a little bit my experience and raise the question building on that. So my question is mostly on multidisciplinarity. So my experience is experience of somebody who studied law for 5 years in Italy and then started to work in the sector of cultural heritage legislation and art law. So I had a very normal legal background, let's say, and then I had a very multidisciplinary PhD education in analysis and management of cultural heritage, where I had also courses in archaeology, museology, management, cultural heritage legislation, etc. So what I have seen is that, for example, this multidisciplinary approach, which I think is the only ones to work in this field, because we cannot talk about legal norms or regulation without knowing the subject and the object we are working with. But what I have seen in terms of multidisciplinarity is that these multidisciplinary skills and knowledge are very much requested in the to work outside academia. So, for example, I don't know, in association, international organization, etc. And I am a researcher now, so I kept working in academia. As far as I see, in Italy, at least, multidisciplinarity is something not yet envisaged by for academic positions. So I still have to be evaluated for administrative law, for example, while I work on cultural heritage law and art law, which doesn't formally exist in academia. I train students for that. I teach this kind of subjects, but I, as a professor or researcher, I am evaluated by something very monodisciplinary. So I was like, my question and what I'm wondering is whether in other contexts this is the same, because at least this is the situation in Italy, but I don't know if this is the same for other countries. And if you also see this difference, let's say, for jobs and work position in academia and outside academia and university in terms of multidisciplinarity. Thank you.
Would anyone like to respond to that? Because that certainly struck a chord with me. What Anna is saying is that even though her training and her instinct and sentiment is for multidisciplinarity when it comes to applying for jobs and for career progression, it's left outside the door and you are assessed essentially on what you describe or put forward as your primary qualifications. So is this... has anyone else had that experience? Or is it the case that this is just one of the obstacles that we face in the arena of multidisciplinary education and training? John wants to come back in, and then Wolfgang.
Sorry, I'm trying not to hog the conversation. But
Perfectly all right.
yeah, my experience has been very much that the established structure of single disciplines is a barrier to transdisciplinary developments, particularly as it relates to heritage. There were plans in my own institution. I'm not sure how far they've got because I've sort of left now. But there were plans for a module for students that would cross-cut our own field in heritage, archaeology, history, art history, and I don't know, a couple of other things as well. And it at that stage, at least, it all fell apart because the art historians made a claim for control over it. And I'm sure they do a wonderful job in art history and gallery management and things. But they were, but it meant that that because they were such tightly in control, everything was seen from their perspective, and there was no room for the full sort of transdisciplinarity and complexity that the module was designed to address. So at least at that stage, it sort of rather fell apart. And yeah, we are divided by disciplines. I mean, I'm an archaeologist by conviction and by training who does heritage. It's not a that's and I think that's the case with a lot of people. A lot of my colleagues are anthropologists who do heritage, or they whatever they may be. But it's their home discipline that always comes first. I'll be quiet now.
No, that's your experience is very valuable to us. Wolfgang, you have your hand up, and John, could you take your hand down, and that then reorders the queue. Thank you.
Yes, I think it is all about core and transversal skills. I see this from my perspective, having two types of education. One is as a conservatory restorer, which at that time was still quite artistic in a way. And the second studies I did was chemistry, so science. And my experience now is that, taking the example of science, you really need a profound education in that field. If you start to mix that, you will lack specific topics within the scientific field, which will hinder you to perform really as a professional. So you need a very solid education in science before you can go to cultural heritage. So cultural heritage in that sense then is a transversal skill, which has to be transmitted, of course. But as a second step, if you start to mix it and reduce the overall educational part, it will not be very successful, I feel.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure whether you are you're characterizing heritage studies as transdisciplinary by their very nature, but that's a thought worth holding on to. Before I pass over to Margarita, there was a question in the chat there from Andreas Abad, and it concerned involving the creative cultural industries. Now, it's not so much a question, I think, as an observation, but Andreas, if you're there, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think that speaks to this cross-pollination and multidisciplinary thread that we're following. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. Yeah, the question is because in all the regular calls by the European Commission, even when I realized that this is not the topic of the focus of this webinar, thank you for inviting me. It's a trending topic in all the countries that even at national level, you should involve the cultural creative industries in all the improvements or all the developments that you do, not only in formal but in non-formal education. So I realized that it could be related with the cross-pollination that you mentioned, but I miss it in the presentations that you provided in the panel. I really appreciate the presentation by the panelists, but I think that sometimes it's needed that the academia take into consideration what the people from the market or from the grassroots level needs to say, relating what are the people that we want working with us, what can the academia provide to us. This is my question about. Thank you.
Your question is very apposite and topical, and regularly comes up in conversations in Charter, the members of which are concerned about a perceptual problem, that culture is contemporary and heritage is about the past, and not seeing heritage as an expression of contemporary culture. And so what that would mean is that the creative cultural industries and heritage are in some quarters perceived as almost incompatible, because they refer to different temporal experiences and so on. Whereas those of us working in the Charter project, and I think in the heritage sector in general, wouldn't agree with that. But you're quite right that we do need to be politically aware of what are the trending topics, and make sure that, as to use John Carmen's expression, we insinuate heritage into them. Do you want to come back and speak to that, Margherita?
No, I wanted to speak about, so I wanted to go back to Anna's example and point out, if I may, Andres,
yes,
sorry about that. I'm jumping back.
That's okay. Oh.
I think, it really very much depends. We're in Europe. It really depends on the dynamism of the labor market. For a profile such as Anna's to be acknowledged, to be recognized, it really requires a labor market that keeps the pace with reality. And I would like to come back to the last example of a profession that is in place, that of mental health manager in a museum. Now, this is a person who trained as a psychologist, a mindfulness specialist, and so on, and ended up in a museum. Why that? And why could it not be so in Italy, for instance? Because in the Netherlands, you have the possible museums starting in the at the end of the 1990s, they all became private foundations funded by public money, but with a different legal status that allows them to hire, fire, and organize their Marlene, maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I found, in my research and in my conversations with colleagues. So I see myself frozen. So the question is, if the organization is ready to incorporate a new profile because it sees the need for it, then it's a completely different matter, as opposed to situations where the labor market is stuck and cannot move because the profiles are blocked and have been blocked for years. So, and then they don't keep pace with the changing needs of society and of the cultural organization itself. So back to the, so I think it really very much depends on where you are.
Indeed, it does. I'm afraid we're kind of reaching the moment of the end of the discussion. And I'm sorry if we haven't been able to go into the things in depth, Andres in particular, in the context of creative cultural industries, but perhaps Marlene has something to say about that. And I'm going to end with Marlene and pass over to Martina De Luca shortly, just to make sure that we remain on time.
Oh, briefly, because I found Andrea Sabast's question very interesting as a cultural economist by training, and I mean, crafts is seen as the birthplace, right? According to ENCATC, as birthplace for the cultural and creative industries, and as such, cultural heritage is also part of it. But I think you raised a very interesting and important issue that we might emphasize it that better. That it is part of that creative and cultural industry, and as such has a bigger question, or has a larger and more important aim to fulfill. But still, I think it also, the emphasis is more or less on the more contemporary cultural industries, right? And we don't consider cultural heritage as such. However, it is definitely part of that CCE as you put forward. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's an awful shame to have to draw this discussion to a close. I think we're starting to generate a bit of momentum, but anyway, one of the objectives of this exercise is not just to introduce a selection of some of the emerging and innovative curricula that the Charter project is advocating for, but also to begin the process of generating an alliance. And with the numbers of participants we have here today, right from across the world, as Gianluca has said at the Giannalia rather has said at the very start, I think we're well on the way to do that. So I'm now going to hand over to Martina Di Luca, who is going to wrap things up for us. So thank you very much for your participation, everybody.
Thanks very much. We are at the end of this useful seminar, very interesting. And first of all, of course, I would like to thank everybody, the participants, the speakers, the organization for the contribution. And now I just add some few words to conclude this seminar, this session. I think it's important in this moment to underline once again what are these paths, because we believe they are relevant for the cultural heritage sector, and focus on some principles behind the specific of each path are recurrent, and as we have heard now during the debate, are very important and very relevant for all of us. We have intended this path as a flexible framework which can easily adapted by to the different regional or national education system, and also can improve the size of the organization to think about the way to approach the cultural heritage in a new way. These paths are so they are not intended to create new profile, but to increase the heritage curricula, both in higher education and continuous education. And this is important because they can adapt to the size of the level of education without any problem. Just thinking about what you need in this moment in the context. As Margherita said, the important is where you are, and this is important also for the provider of education. And the general aim is to help the cultural heritage to be more sustainable and to face the challenge, the challenge that we are in this society is changing very, very fast. I think the one of the most important principles that we repeat are the opportunity, but also the duty for all the professionals in the heritage sector to be able to connect different fields of knowledge. So to approach with a real interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach in the education, but also in the workplace. How to talk, how to increase the relationship with other sectors, with other people, with the people who came to the museum, but also with the other professionals that are interested in cultural heritage. And moreover, one other thing very important is that we have to adopt a people-centered approach to heritage, but also at the same time, our curricula to be designed should be adopt a people-centered approach, so to be able to intercept the real needs and also anticipate which are the future needs for professional now and during the job. And then the last thing, also in the same time, we need to balance the core skills and transversal skills, how to merge, how to try to find a right balance between this kind of skills, always important for professional heritage. So I think this is one of the things that we can keep in our mind. And then with the last slide, we can see where you can find some more information. If you can, yes, Anna. Yeah, here you can find the link to our report with all the guidelines of innovative emerging cultural heritage pathway, education and training path. Thanks to everybody, and have a nice time and nice afternoon or morning where you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martina. Thank you for everyone that has contributed to this talk that I found, and I'm sure I'm talking on behalf of all the participants, extremely well prepared. You see all the effort that each of you has put in preparing your presentations. So I really want to thank for the energy and effort that you have devoted to this talk and for your professionalism. It was really nice to see how much funding you have managed to extract from these 2 intensive years, but also how many challenges. I was impressed by listening all these new difficulties, opportunities in the same time, a way to address the sector. For sure, a lot of thoughts and opportunities in the same times. So again, thank you so much for this. We move now to the last slides where we wanted to inform you that the charter community will partner again with us in September, where we are going to host a charter talks in the frame of the ENCATC Congress. So the Congress will be devoted to understand from theoretical but also practical perspectives how you can effort an holistic and cross-sectorial mindset to find a sustainable solution for the culture and creative sectors. Indeed, the last challenges question was about transsectorialities, new way of approaching. This is the reality. Coming from different background, educational background, and working in the cultural sector. This we really believe, and this is why we are doing the Congress on this topic, is the future, because the world is complex and we need to have cross-disciplinary, cross-sectorial answer. So we wait, we leave now and we wait for September to again partner and meet the charter community. Thank you so much.